begun. So it's the golden age of America, and that's what it's going to be. And we hope we don't have any intervening problems, because things happen.
Can I hear that again?
Intervening problems, because things happen.
Now, to those who have ears to hear can clearly hear that something is coming. For those who have wisdom can pick up what Mr. Golden Age is laying down. And this Golden Age terminology is very New Age. As we can see right here, the Golden Age, Aquarius, and the Ring Planet. And this is coming from the official Theosophical Society website. Now, for those who do not know what Theosophy is, it is a religious and philosophical system established in the United States in the late 19th century. It was founded primarily by the Russian Helena Blavatsky and based largely on her writings. It draws heavily from both old European philosophies, such as Neoplatonism, and Indian religions, such as Hinduism and Buddhism. And as we can see down here, it is clumped in with new religious movements and form of occultism. Now, the founder of the Theosophical Society, or should I say the co-founder, is Helena Blavatsky, a Russian and American mystic and author who co-founded the Theosophical Society in 1875. This Theosophical Society loves to talk about the Golden Age, where you also had Alice Bailey, who was an author about 25 books on theosophy and among the first writers to use the term New Age, who directly speaks about the prophecy of the Golden Age and the reappearance of the Christ. Now, her writings between 1919 and 1949 describe a wide-ranging neo-theosophical system of esoteric thought covering such topics as how spirituality relates to the solar system, meditation, healing, spiritual psychology, and destiny of nations, and prescriptions for society in general. Now, get this, she described the majority of her work as having been telepathically dictated to her by a master of wisdom, initially referred to only as the Tibetan. Now, her writings bore the same similarities of those of Blavatsky. So through meditation and esoteric spirituality, they were channeling these ascended masters, where one of Alice Bailey's writings was about the reappearance of the Christ, which there will be a dawning upon the awakening consciousness of humanity. Sound familiar? X, the group chat, collective conscious of Earth. Now, this reappearance of the Christ was prophesied to happen in the year 2025, as we can see down here coming from Lucis Trust, which used to be Lucifer Trust, which was founded by Alice Bailey. And we can see right here, 2025 is a Jubilee year in the Christian and Jewish calendar that is also the focus of prophecy. And students of the writings of Alice Bailey know that the year 2025 is anticipated to be of vital spiritual significance. And according to her teachings, this hierarchy consists of ascended masters and spiritual entities guiding humanity's evolution. Bailey claimed that these beings hold a significant meeting every 100 years with their human agents, with the next major and final General Assembly scheduled for 2025. Now, something else I found interesting is how on January 20th, 2025, we have a start date for Aquarius, which we can see down here. Aquarius season is a time when people are encouraged to embrace their individuality, thinking outside the box, and advocate for positive change in their communities and the world. It's a season that celebrates uniqueness and collective consciousness. Where do we see that before? So all of this coming together at the same time that Mr. Golden Dawn is ushering in the Golden Age.
The Golden Age of Saturn's America. President Trump said, quote, Vice President Vance, Speaker Johnson, Senator Thune, Chief Justice Roberts, Justices of the Supreme Court of the United States, President Clinton, President Bush, President Obama, President Biden, Vice President Harris, and my fellow citizens. The Golden Age of America begins right now. Unquote. The Golden Age referenced by Trump and his administration has now become a mimetic hyperstition, a platitudinous slogan that has colonized the minds of all that it has touched and tainted. Esoterically, it relates exclusively to the mythological Golden Age of Saturn Kronos and the coming age of Aquarius, along with the 7th millennia of the onset of the Messianic Age, which was a zodiacal sign traditionally under the planetary genus of Saturn, that being Aquarius. Moreover, Saturn Kronos sought to steal the throne of heaven from his father, Uranos Kalos, the sky or heaven deified, and a metaphysical and altogether metaphorical sense, this relates to the imposition of the cubic will over the radial spirit, the material box that traps the infinitely perfect circle. In more modern parlance, it is the biodigital convergence and artificial general intelligence that shall bring about the loss of reason and logic, control over our mental faculties, the disconnection from our spirit and our humanity, and the captivity of the comfortably numbing malaise, a digitally induced maladaptation. The intelligence is artificial, because our natural intelligence will have been deserted by that point, and we shall put all of our faith in oracular machines of cold binary calculation. This is the stage of the last man. The age of Aquarius is when the water-bearer, in his ostensible age of man, pours forth the previously contained waters of knowledge and hidden information, drowning all those below in the path of its furious cascade. In the informational age, the technological pouring of the waters of life and knowledge is being sent forth, and in the beginning, all will be bedazzled by the abundance that Saturn Kronos has generously delivered, for waters shall cover the priorly parched land. Yet in time, this bedazzlement will turn to dreadful realization, and a fight to keep one's head above this water of information. Naturally, this is because man has not yet developed the ability to breathe underwater, just like man does not evolve concurrently with the evolution of his tools and technology. Saturn and his coming golden age, the long-awaited kingdom, was heralded, hidden in plain sight. Virgil relayed in his work, the Aeneid, concerning the golden age of Saturn, quote, "He gathered together the unruly race of fauns and nymphs, scattered over mountain heights, and gave them laws. Now has come the last age according to the oracle at Cumae. The great series of lifetimes starts anew. Now too the virgin goddess returns, and the golden days of Saturn's reign returns. Now a new race is sent down from heaven high." Unquote. Naturally, this notion that Saturn Kronos, the final and most patient of planets, the deific father of time, ruled over this age of creation born anew, as an archetypal and energetic essence, where humanity enjoyed peace and abundance without the need for work, relates very precisely to the touted advantages of the AI and AGI age, or full automation, UBI, and the advancement of robotics technology. Moreover, concurrent with the new race, who is sent down from high heaven or heaven on high, we witness eerie parallels with the Homo Deus, or Godmen, of Yuval Noah Harari, of WEF fame, and the futurist dream of transhuman augmentation via biodigital convergence. Saturn Kronos, or Yahweh, would rule over such a golden age, because he would be digitized fully through the Internet of all things, being the Adon Olam of all things, the Lord Eternal. The Delphic and apotheosized algorithms of a global algocracy. In addition to, we may identify as well, like Yahweh, Saturn Kronos sought to give over to the unruly and imperfect world of this creation a plethora of laws to thus control the chaos that he had unleashed or attempted to tame into creation. These encompass the distinct components of the first stage of the alchemical magnum opus, Negredo, or putrefaction, whose colour is Saturnian black. Putre derives from the Latin word for decay, and factio is a Latin verb root to make or to do, that sort of meaning. Hence, like masonry, we have another allusion to the mythic mantra of Ordo ab Chao, or order out of chaos. As we see with the Vedic tradition, these are referred to as the Yuga cycle. The 4 ages are as follow. Krita Satya, age of truth, literally the golden age. Yuga, Treta, the age of 3. Yuga, Dvapara, the age of 2. Yuga and Kali Yuga, the age of darkness. The age of vice and misery, or the age of quarrel and hypocrisy. The present age, full of unresolved strife and unremittent sin. This is what their great reset entails. The resetting artificially through the tikkun, rectification, to the age of Kritya Satya, or the age of the dawn of truth, the golden age of Saturnian Chronos, as it is also called. This Vedic conception, naturally, relates to the Greco-Roman understanding of the ages of man, or even the Nahuatl oscillating model of the 5 suns, 5 cycles of dawn to dusk and dawn and dusk, creation and destruction. Like each age of the Yuga cycle, it is broken into 3 periodical states: dawn, middle, and dusk. The Golden Age. The Golden Age is the only age that falls within the rule of Kronos, created by the immortals who live on Olympus. These humans were said to live among the gods and freely mingled with them. Peace and harmony prevailed during this age. Humans did not have to work to feed themselves, for the earth provided food in abundance. They lived to very old age, but with a youthful appearance, and eventually died peacefully. Their spirits live on as guardians. Plato in Cratylus 397e recounts the golden race of men who came first. He clarifies that Hesiod did not mean men literally made of gold, but good and noble men. He describes these men as daemons upon the earth, since daemones is derived from literally the same word, daemones, meaning knowing or wise. It can also mean spirit. They are beneficent, preventing ills, and guardians of mortals. Something else to mention there, just very, very quickly, and I don't want to stop the flow of this, well, what will be a book, but this video, but I covered in my book, Yahweh is Satan, something quite interesting to say the least, and it parallels these very peculiar and perplexing comparisons between, for example, Saturn, Kronos, Yahweh, looking back from what I include regarding the Kronos Anglometes, which Anglometes is an appellation for Saturn, which means the plotting one, the deceiver, the crooked one, he who plots things in the darkness, that type of idea. We see that Yahweh, just looking through this Yahweh is Satan now, we can see that Yahweh, both Satan and Yahweh, despised the host of heaven and were, expelled from heaven. They were thrown down from on high. So we have Revelation 12:7-9, where it discusses the dragon, or Satan. Yahweh as well is likened to a dragon, like Leviathan. You can see that in Psalm 18, compared to Job 41's description of Leviathan, Psalm 18's description of Yahweh. Job 4:9 also has a similar description of Yahweh as a dragon, as a fire-breathing dragon, quite literally. So the great dragon was cast out, that serpent of old called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world, right? He was cast to the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. This, of course, links to the Book of Enoch and the story of Shem Yaza, who, it seems from the writings in the Book of Enoch, he originated the first. He established the first secret society of, I believe, 300 of these angels, as they're called, or archons, and they all took blood oaths for this agenda on imprecation of death, right? On the cursing of death curses, which of course still continues today. in the likes of masonry and such. So we see that Shem Yaza, by the way, means literally, from its etymological roots, he who stares at the heavens. So essentially like Saturn, who was cast to Tartarus, he who stares up at the heavens, this chthonic deity who has burrowed himself into the earth, who has sought to control the earth, to germinate his seed upon the earth, his abyssal seed upon the earth, to thus overthrow the Olympiads, the heavenly host who cast him down. So we see that within Isaiah 34:4, where it describes Yahweh's judgment upon the nations and upon heaven, where it states, "All the stars in the sky will be dissolved, and the heavens rolled up like a scroll. All the starry host will fall like withered leaves from the vine, like shriveled figs from the fig tree. Thus Yahweh will destroy the host of heaven." Whereas Satan was driven from heaven, this denotes that both possess a contention with heaven. Another thing that it mentions as well, there we go. So Isaiah 49:23, again discussing this idea of the new order of the ages, literally the eternal kingdom that will come to encompass the entire earth, this idea of world government, this millennia-old conspiracy for it. Quote, "Kings shall be your nursing fathers, and their queens your nursing mothers. They shall bow down to you with their faces to the land, and lick the dust from the soles of your feet, and you shall know that I am the Lord." Now notice as well it states that I am the Lord, not that I am king, which the term would be melech or moloch in the Hebrew, in the Semitic tongue. It states the Lord, or Adon. That is a pretty significant distinction, because there are many lords, but there is only one king, right? There is many gods, but there is only one God, a true God, who sits upon the throne of heaven, right? That is quite a grave distinction to make. "And those who wait for me shall not be put to shame, and those who wait for me shall not be put to shame. I am the Lord," unquote. Does no one find that quite strange? And those who wait for me, like the Lord is lost. He's not here right now. That we have to manifest him, if you will. Well, not us specifically, but the clique who are busily attempting to manifest this golden age, right? It was known to the Greco-Romans that once the golden age elapsed, that Kronos had left, that he had been expelled to Tartarus, right? And what do we read of in the book of Ezekiel, in Ezekiel's vision of the throne of heaven? Who sits upon that throne? Yahweh. And what is Yahweh? He's the figure of a man who is encased in fire. This almost paradox of his internal form is completely made up of a silhouette of fire, right? All around him are these demonic deities, essentially. If you look at the biblical descriptions of angels, those are what we would, in the modern day, at least in the West, those are the images we would conjure as demons. Just completely nightmarish deities from the abyss. Which also gets into Choronzom of John Dee and Crowley. And even its linking, its transliterative link to Kronos, right? Kor of the Choronzom. The entire thing means dweller of the abyss, but Kor can mean counter or to count. So literally Choronzom is he who counts within the abyss, he who literally attempts to manifest forms within the abyss through order and counting and law and judgment, right? Again, like Saturn's a god of judgment, a god of law, like what we see with Ninurta. Shagush was another name that the female version went by. So it's a god of law, it's a god of time, it's a god of judgment, or also a goddess of judgment as well. We see that again, as I've just mentioned, Ninhursag, also later the Cappadocian Cybele, whose name literally is to be found within the Kabbalistic, I guess you would call it field of study, Cybernetics or Kybernetikos, meaning steersman. He who steers, he who attempts to steer the chaos, and that was established by the Kabbalist Norbert Wiener, right? So again, that you could say cybernetics is what is actually the prototypical school of thought that inspired, that gave rise to both AI, eventual AGI, and also algocracy, or a rule by algorithm. And Yuval Noah Harari speaks of this almost oracular, apotheosized algorithm of the Internet of all things, which will come to encompass and to, again, steer, right? To steer the world. It will become the cybernetic, the kybernetikos of the world, the oar which steers the world. So again, this is all based on this same Saturnine Cronian principle that we see wrapped up in Yahweh. Another one, by the way, is you see within the book of Matthew, and I'll get the actual quote because a bit of an error on my part. I didn't include this quote in Yahweh is Satan, though I should have, where it discusses the Lord of the Harvest. And Matthew 9:37 to 38, where it discusses, yes, then saith he unto his disciples, the harvest truly is plenteous, and the labourers are few. Pray ye therefore the Lord of the harvest, that he will send forth labourers into his harvest. The Lord of the harvest. Of course, we have Saturn with his scythe, and that sort of imagery, right, of the Lord of the barley, the Lord of the harvest. This was all wrapped up in Ninurta. Of course, I believe he created what are called the Georgic or the Georgikos poetry, the agricultural poetry of that of Sumeria. Yes, so 2 Corinthians 4:4, in whom the God of this world hath blinded the minds of men, of them, which believeth not, and then it goes on. But Paul himself also says that it is Yahweh himself who blinds the non-believer, 2 Thessalonians 2:11-12, and for this cause God shall send them strong delusion, and they should believe a lie, that they all might be damned who believeth not the truth. It also mentions as well that Yahweh is the God of this world. I mean, we also have the Tacitus and other Roman scholars of the day, Greeks as well, Greek scholars, who mentioned that the Abrahamics worshipped Saturn. Saturn was holy to them. Of course, Saturn was holy to that of the Romans, but not monotheistically, in equal measure with the rest of the gods, or the elements of the mosaic of the psyche, essentially. We contrast that 2 Corinthians 4:4 with Psalm 47, verses 2-3, quote, "The Lord Most High is wonderful. He is the great King over all the earth. He defeated nations for us and put them under our control." I mean, it's the same sort of idea that it appears that this Lord is a Lord of the earth. Now, is there any provenance for that, any sort of historical or comparative mythological evidence for Yah or Yahweh or even Yahu being the Lord of the earth, being a sort of Saturnine deity of the harvest? Well, there is, yes. I mean, we don't have to go very far back. All you do is you take Yah, you trace it back to its Akkadian roots, because obviously Yah or Yod He is the Amorite or Western Semitic version. The Akkadian is EA. That's usually how it's anglicised. It's pronounced the same, Yah. Right, I know it's not spelled the same, but it's pronounced the same, Yah, and that is basically a Semiticization, if that's, I've just coined that term, of the Sumerian Enki, which literally means Lord of the Earth. Enki is associated with Mercury. Now, Ninurta, who was the son, well, typically is seen as the son of Enlil, Lord of the Air, usually associated with Jupiter. And Ninurta, or Saturn, was he who first taught, according to the Song of the Hoe, and there's also another clay tablet called the Farmer's Instructions. It's also called the Georgica poems, I believe. Georgica meaning sort of farm work, if you will, from the Greek, which is of course why we have the Georgia Guidestones. Again, the Guidestones to the human farming, or Guidestones to the harvest. They destroyed them because, well, the harvest is already underway. They no longer need that guidance anymore. And it's a way for them to take away the physical evidence of their plotting, of their Anglometes, if you will. So you see in this Farmer's Instructions that Ninurta instructed the early humans of how to farm, of how to harvest the grain, of how to till the soil. So he was involved in that. Enki was also involved very much as a Promethean character, where we see the Sumerian Noah, Zusudra, or also known as Shurupak, and the Akkadian version was Atrasis, literally the most wise man, or Atrahasis, I think was the term. He also went by Utnapishtim as well in some regions, and it appears the north of the Akkadian Empire. But anyway, this deity of Enki, or Yah, or Ea, he spoke to man, he taught man, he instructed man on how to build an ark. Or not man, this Atrahasis, or this Noah figure in both the Akkadian and Sumerian lore, of how to survive this flood. And he did that behind his brother Enlil's back. Now, of course, when monotheism came along, Yahweh basically became both the tormentor and the savior, the rebel and the tyrant, right? There was no longer any demarcation between the archetypal elements. It was just one contiguous god, one contiguous archetype, of which, of course, turned it into a totally capricious and, as it's been described, this Yahweh character, completely schizophrenic. Because, as it states in Isaiah 45, Yahweh states, I create both the light and the dark. I'm the author of good and evil and all of this, right? Because he takes on both that Saturnian and Mercurial aspect. He takes on all aspects, Jupiterian, solar, lunar, you name it. So monotheism is syncretization. It's hyper-syncretization in one figure, essentially. And that's what Yod He Vav He is from the Kabbalistic lore. It is well, as it states, it's Yod, fire, He, first He, water, Vav, air or aether, and the second He, which is feminine, earth, right? So fire, water, air or aether, space, and then earth. So it's a symbolic descent. Another thing quickly to mention regarding, being brought down to Tartarus, to being exiled in Tartarus, both Saturn and Kronos, we see that both Yahweh and Satan also were cast down. We see that even the etymology of Tartarus links with this concept of the Golden Age. And, well, it's very interesting. I'll just read this. However, Kronos and his chthonic nature does not just implate upon him the limiting condition of being regulated to the underworld, but we do bear witness to him having temporal associations that are seen within the world vis-a-vis the temporal dimension of time, and he even dwells further than the underworld or Hades in a realm called Tartarus, or the eschaton beyond existence, akin somewhat to the later conceptions of the Greeks, such as the Erebos, the Sanskrit Rajas, or the Hellenic Tartarus, or Kata Tartaru, the longer form classical term associated with the act of the Titans being cast into Tartarus following on from the conclusion of the Titanomachy, or the War of the Titans. The term itself came to mean cast down, in later definitions Tartarus quite literally, and was featured within the Greek New Testament of 2 Peter's 2:4, quote, "For if God did not spare angels when they sinned, but cast them into hell, Tartaros, and committed them to chains of gloomy darkness to be kept until the judgment," unquote. The Greek Tartaros has no distinct etymology, and thus was most likely an imaginative invention of an erstwhile and now unknown mythologist, although Strabo did comment on its potential etymology, stating that he believed it to be a slight alteration of the city of Tartessos, which was done by Homer. This city lay to the far west of the inland sea, or the Mediterranean, and was featured within the Atlantis myth, and was contained within the 10 kingdoms of Atlantis, adjacent Gades or modern-day Cadiz. Hence, what was implied by Homer in regards to his imaginative reformulation of Tartessos was that Tartarus lay beyond Heraklioi, Stele, or the Pillars of Hercules, the Straits of Gibraltar, where the sun skims past the Oceanus and enters the netherworld of Tartarus. This entire etymology, of course, bears some marks of intersection with the themes and objects contained in the Atlantean myth of Plato. Indeed, the condemned and sunken Atlantis itself bears some correlation to the Golden Age of Saturn, as the Romans and Greeks both described it. Additionally, we have some connections to the Hebrew and Phoenician city of Tarshish and the Anatolian city of Tarsos. Incidentally, Tarshish is mentioned within the Old Testament several times, typically in relation to the famed merchant fleet or wealthy city that aided in the construction of the Solomonic Temple. That's found in 1 Kings 10 verse 22. It was said to be located on an island or on the coast, Psalm 72 verse 10 and Isaiah 23 verse 6, and was touted to be a great distance from Palestine, Isaiah 66 verse 19 and Jonah 1 verse 3. Although it is without a doubt that whatever or wherever Tarshish was, it was associated with a global merchant navy that amassed great wealth and sailed many times for the mythical land of Ophir. 1 Kings 22 verse 48. The land of Ophir is another mystery in and of itself, most likely linking to the long-held mercantile secret of the Americas. But the fleet of Israel under Solomon, built in Ezion-Geber, near Eloth, may also be associated with Tarshish in some way. However, digressing, this mercantilist desire for utopia and the overabundance of gold and luxury items is extremely Saturnian, Of course, the Temple of Saturn in Rome was the traditional location of the treasury of Rome, and would later be repurposed into a primitive central bank during the later Republican and Imperial eras, during the incremental and insipid debasement of the Roman state-issued currency. Another thing to mention as well is that the Mar-2 literally means those of the West. That is what the Sumerians and Akkadians called the Amorites, and that's where the term Amorite comes from, or at least that's how they designated the Amorites. Those of the West, obviously denoting that they hail from the Western Semitic regions, the Levant and Syria and such. But perhaps there was a deeper psychological connotation to this that, of course, perhaps links to the solar cycles. The West is where the sun sets, was more so related to this sort of Saturnian, almost Shivite or Cronian destructive entity, that they were almost a manifestation of decay and disorder, and they were a harbinger of time and the destructive and indiscriminate tendencies of time. I think that's how they saw them. And he said to them, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. Luke 10:9, verses 9, 17 to 18. And compare that with Psalm 18 verses 12 to 13. Out of the brightness of his presence, clouds advanced, this is referring to Yahweh, with hailstones and bolts of lightning. The Lord thundered from heaven. This also relates to Bel or Bel Marduk or Bel Hadad or Baal Hadad, and of course Yahweh himself, being storm and war deities, along with metallurgical deities too. Hence why he's associated with burning coals and dragons and fire breathing and all of this as well. That also links with Hermes' vision of Poimandres. Poimandres literally means, it's a Greek compound, it literally means the shepherd of man. So you have this idea of the shepherd again, which I touch upon in my Blood on the Sand. This notion of the Amorites being pastoralists and nomads, and this always crops up, right? Shepherds and sheep and flocks and all of this. You can tell a lot about a people just from the deities that they worship, because all of this is basically built upon stories that were brought down through oral traditions. So yes, so you see there, thundered from heaven, so he was literally cast from heaven, right? And he has this contention with heaven that come the time of judgment, he will roll up the heavens like a scroll, all the starry host will be withered like leaves on the vine, so on and so forth. Satan, who is the god of this world, contrast that to Psalm 47 verses 2 to 3. The Lord Most High is wonderful, he is the great king over all the earth. He defeated nations for us and put them under our control. He is great king over all the earth. He is the Lord of the earth, right? This is why we see 2 Kings 21:7, where it mentions that the name of the Lord will be etched into Jerusalem. The figure that's etched into Jerusalem is the figure of the Shin letter, the Shem, right? The triadic hand claw sign, which is seen throughout multiple paintings and portraits of nobility, where you'll see this triadic hand sign. It's like a W shape, or the Greek letter Psi. Funnily enough, Dealey Plaza, where JFK was shot, was in the shape of a letter Psi, or of course the Hebrew letter Shin. It's like a W shape, as I've mentioned. That relates to time. It's the three thresholds of time. Again, Saturn is the god of time. Another thing to mention as well is this appears within Shiva's Trishula. Shiva is, of course, the lord of destruction, right? He is literally the deified embodiment of destruction. And then we see it within Poseidon. Poseidon, though he is the lord of the sea, he's a sort of mercurial deity like Enki was. Enki was associated with water. Funnily enough, he's also, again, from the etymological root of Poseidon, comes from an Attic Greek compound or portmanteau, which means literally Lord of the Earth. And he has, of course, the trident, which is in the shape of the W, or the Psi letter, or the Shin letter, the three thresholds of time. Janus is similar in that regard, which he seems to descend from the Etruscan Satyr, or Sator, meaning sower or cedar, which Saturn probably derives from as well, again relating to the harvest. Saturn was also invoked in terms of divination. We can see that with the liver of Piacenza, which is an archaeological artifact. Well, it has on it, inscribed in it, the name of Satyr, and they believe it was used for haruspicy, which is using the entrails of animals and the livers of animals to divinate, to typically divine the outcome of a battle. So another thing to mention as well regarding Shiva, and this links all the way back to Pasupati, and we see the Pasupati seal from the Harappan civilization and the primary city there, which is now named, it probably didn't possess this name in years gone by, but it's now named Mohenjo-daro. And we see also in the Harappan city of Lothal, which also means the same thing in that localized Indian dialect, it means mound of the dead. So both Mohenjo-daro and Lothal mean mounds of the dead. Lothal is found in just north of the Gujarati Peninsula, and Mohenjo-daro is found in, I believe, northern Balochistan, which is modern-day Pakistan. What we find within these cities is that they were major copper traders. We see the potential from the archaeological evidence and just the basic comparisons between, for example, Sumeria. Of course, the Sumerians themselves were not native to that region. They were incomers, and by whatever means they managed to claim the rulership over the native Mesopotamians of that region. But interestingly, the Sumerian priest class also shaved their heads, which is something you find with the people of the Dharmic faiths, the Vedic traditions. They believe that shaving their heads brings them closer to God. There's also other comparisons, as we will go through with Shiva. Even a lot of the various deities you find within both Indo-European and, of course, Mesopotamian and Semitic, even Egyptian, and other Afro-Asiatic peoples as well. You find a lot of their deities are very, very, very similar to what you see within the Vedic and, just in general, the Dharmic and Hindu religion. It's absolutely, it's not by accident. This is because the philosopher priests, the Brahmins and such, they must have been nomadic to some degree. The mercantilists as well must have been nomadic, and they simply cross-pollinated, theologically speaking and philosophically and culturally speaking, throughout their various trade routes. Now, of course, where Sumeria is based, that goes through the Strait of Hormuz, which itself is part of that trade route that runs, round the coast of India. It's stopping off in the major centres of both southern Pakistan, southern Balochistan, and the Gujarati Peninsula, leading through the Strait of Hormuz. And obviously it leads up to the delta basin of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers at what's now modern day Kuwait, what was then Sumeria. So, I mean, it's not too much of a stretch of the imagination to imagine that there was some sort of, cultural and religious and philosophical cross-pollination occurring between those regions and between those peoples as well, that perhaps resulted in a portion of those peoples invading Mesopotamia and cementing themselves as the Sumerian dynasty there, within primarily Ur and other cities in the region. But we see within the Pasupati seal this same idea of Cassiopeia, or the World Tarot card. You see Pasupati, you see he has the W horn, right, shape on the top of his head. Again, the 3 thresholds of time. Pasupati, by the way, means Lord of all animals. And you see around him the same sort of quadrant of animals. Quadrant of the 4 royal stars of Persia: Regulus, Fomalhaut, Aldebaran, and Antares. So you see the same idea there, and you see the Shin letter, or the 3 thresholds of time. Pasupati also appears to be a proto-Shivite deity, meaning he's of that Mahadeva, or the great god, the sort of Shivite archetype. But we're at a point right now in terms of antiquity where he's not yet fully formed into Shiva. This deity, by the way, also bears striking resemblances to Cernunnos. Cairn literally means horn within the Celtic languages, which is why you see the term Cern, right? Or Cairn. It's the same idea. Again, horn. John Dee had Tuba Veneris, where he discusses within it various magical incantations and rites and such. But I remember, if memory serves me correctly, there was a page in that where he discusses the Tetragrammaton in its, alchemical and elemental essence. And he sort of makes this comparison between the vortices, or the vortexes, and the toroid, and of course the horn, right, or the tuba in Latin. So again, that's all connected to it as well. Again, a sort of portal. Another thing to mention regarding this as well is that, yes, Cernunnos, or literally the horned one, Cairn, horn, and Unos, one. That Cernunnos may also link with Kronos, right? And if we look to John Dee's Enochian, or Adamic or angelic language, or him and Edward Kelly, and also Aleister Crowley wrote about this Kronzom character, that the core, very similar to the cairn, and the Kron, it means to count. So literally, Kronzom is the counter of the abyss, but in the context it means dweller of the abyss. But it's the counter who dwells in the abyss, if you will. It is like shekel, or I forget the Akkadian, but etymologically it means to weigh something or to count something, to judge it. So shekel, core, all of these ideas surrounding money as well, right? Surrounding dataism. It's about counting information. It's about putting information in a digital blockchain ledger. Even that idea of the block and the blockchain. The block is the cube. It is the stone. Of course, Yahweh within the Old Testament is linked to stones as well through various verses. I think I'm pretty sure I list them because it's quite an important thing to mention, and I list that within my book Yahweh and Satan. But even this idea of the mountain, Pasupati and both Shiva are both linked with mountains, not as fervently as we see within the Levantine and of course later Abrahamic traditions, where you actually have Bel Shaddai or El Shaddai or of course Bel Sadeh, and of course that links to Sadidus, Shakan, and of course the later Attis or Addis. So these ideas are etymologically linked too, these conceptions and deities. So you're seeing with Sadeh or Shadeh or Shaddai, literally from the Akkadian etymology of the mountain. So literally El Shaddai is the god or the El of the mountain. The mountain is where the threshing floor usually was. It's where the wheat was separated from the chaff. It's this same idea that you see with the Naharaja of Shiva, the dance, and the Lord of the Dance, the Lord of the energetic renewal of cycles and such. And of course, we see within CERN, we see that same Enki-like stream of water coming out either side of, well, it seems like the shoulders or the necks of Shiva, right? Those are actually the Ganges rivers. And what that is the same idea as Enki is, that he is, of course, associated with Saturn archetypally, but he's also associated with Mercury. But not the Mercury in terms of the planet, though sometimes it was. In the case of Enki, it was associated with the planet Mercury, but it's associated with this alchemical Mercurius. It is the hidden god. It's the, again, like Mercury, it's this mysterious enigmatic metal that is both a liquid, yet also has the potential to be solidified and be rigid. And moreover as well, it's also opaque, but on the sort of, I guess you would call it iridescent surface, you have this glistening and gleaming, alive vitality, this fire, this spiritual fire on the top of it. It's very enigmatic, it's very mysterious, it's a mystifying metal. That's what that's associated with too. Another thing to mention is it's in the shape, his, the Naharaja of Shiva is in the shape of that of the hexagram, what's known as the Shatkona, within literally the 6 corners, the Shatkona, in that of Hinduism. But if you take Donald Trump's name, right, you can reverse it if you want. I believe it also has a hidden meaning in its reverse state too. I forget now. But if you just take the term Donald Trump and you put it into Hebrew, just transliterate it, which you can do fairly easily, you will get the Hebrew, because Hebrew is alphanumeric, meaning the letters also stand for numbers, you will get the number 430, which of course the 4 plus the 3 equals the 7. The 4 plus the 3, by the way, also is part of the prophecy of what's known in Hebrew as the Shet, which is the Shin, which has value of 300, and the Tav, which has the value of 400 combined. Right. In alchemy, this is known as the Rebus, literally from Latin, the Ribena, which makes you wonder where Ribena got its name from. But anyway, it's a UK drink here. I don't know if it's in the US or worldwide, but you have the Rebus, which is the double matter, the divine hermaphrodite, the child of the egg, the child of the philosopher, the filius philosophorum, or of course the Philosopher's Stone as well. It's also associated with that. It is the combination of the sun and the moon into, of course, the Mercurius, as you can see there, the six-pointed star. Again, the Mercurius is the Mahadeva, the great god, the hidden god. The Abraxas as well was also associated with this, though it didn't particularly last long. It was used merely because it was a conjunction, a comparative conjunction, mythologically and semiotically, meaning in terms of symbols, with that of course, Shiva and all of this. Yes, and of course, the 4 plus the 3, you see that right at the bottom, the 43. This is the combination of the 4 elements and the tria prima. The 3 primes, of course, in alchemy, it's sulfur, or literally Sol, the sun. That of Mercury, not Mercurius, Mercury, or water. That of the moon, or Luna, and the salt, which is the union of those 2 opposites of sulfur and mercury. Of course, if fire evaporates water, or the sea at least, all you have is the salt. So the salt was associated with the earth. It was the divine union of the opposites, the coincidentia oppositorum, the eros gamos, the divine or sacred wedding. So another thing, I've just mentioned this. So Shiva has a statue at CERN, and of course the meaning of Shiva in Sanskrit can be broken down etymologically as Shi, which means in whom all things lie, pervasiveness, again similar to this idea of Mercury or the Mercurius, and Va, which means the embodiment of grace. However, it relates as well to favourable liberation, the auspicious one. Auspicious means he who is propitious, he who is, favourable to success. Right, so this refers to the Annuit Coeptus of the seal of the Great Seal of the United States. I believe it's the reverse of the Great Seal. He who favours our undertaking. Right? He who favours our undertaking. So, what you're seeing with Annuit Coeptus is it's a sort of nod to the auspicious one of Shiva, or Pasupati, or Yahweh, or, whatever term we want to invoke. And you see around Shiva, around that Naharaja, the Lord of the Dance, you see the fire, right? The destructive principle of it. Does that, of course it's Hindu in its artistic representation, but does it not evoke this idea of Ezekiel and Ezekiel's vision? I believe there's other visions that are similar as well in the Old Testament and the biblical records too. This idea of the throne in which sits upon it as a man made of pure fire, right? Very Shivite. Very, very akin to Shiva. Of course, Shiva, by the way, is associated with Saturn. We'll get into that. He is also known as the Destroyer and carries the Trishula or trident, the shin-shaped tri-thresholds of time. According to 2 Kings 21:7, this is the name of the Lord, right, etched into Jerusalem. Jerusalem may have the etymology of Yerushalom, the city of peace, or also Yerushalim, the city of the evening star, literally the city of decay, the city of destruction, the city of Nox, of the night, right? So that may, of course, link to this idea of the destroyer. Quite literally in Hebrew, Shiva means 7, like the number of the Lord and the ordinal position of Saturn. Moreover, Shiva was also associated with Saturn, but also with Mars, the Moon, and Venus as well. all of these, Mars, the Moon, Venus, Saturn, they're all very much linked to this idea of the Saturn myth. And I believe that was put forth by Emanuel Velikovsky. Now, of course, I'm not saying what he was stating was correct, but I find it interesting, at least, that he picked up on that as well. And he stated that there was some sort of all of the, the Mars, the Moon, Venus, and Saturn were all prone to conjunctions, symmetrical conjunctions, I believe, if memory serves me correctly, but don't quote me on that. Another thing to mention as well is that, yes, the number 7. In the myths of Atlantis, right, we have right in the centre of Atlantis, again, is how it was laid out by Plato in the Timaeus and Critias, a temple to Poseidon. And there was a statue in the centre of this temple, in the Holy of Holies, if you will, where Poseidon was the Cyberneticos, the steersman, at the head of this chariot. And as the charioteer, he held the reins of 6 other steeds. Now, again, that's Saturnian in and of itself, that he is the head, like Saturn was, the patient one on the outside of the entire solar system, holding the reins of all the other planets. He was the keeper of time, right? He was the one who maintained the rhythm, the leader of the heavens. So, of course, this idea that we see within the Temple of Atlantis, though it was to Poseidon, or literally the Lord of the Earth, it would appear linking with Enki as well, and in Enki, because of the same semiotics, symbolism, the overlaps between that and the Naharaja, with the Ganges River coming out twofold from Shiva's neck, that perhaps there was a link here, right? Perhaps there was a link here. And of course we have Poseidon's trident, Shiva's Trishula, and Yahweh's Shin letter, or the Shem. They're all interlinked as well. And we have contemporary evidence of ritualism that contains this link, with, for example, the assassination of JFK. So what we're seeing is, for example, with Thoth, or Hermes, or Mercury, that Hermes Trismegistus, that he is claimed by the contemporary neo-esoteric, primarily from Western esotericism, that he was a refugee of Atlantis, and he travelled with the Emerald Tablet to that of the Black Land, the Kemet, quite literally means black land, referring to the black soil, because it was so agriculturally fertile and fecund. And he brought these barbarians at the time knowledge that was beyond them, that came from, of course, Atlantis. Now, we have the Amorites, and if we look at, for example, we have Amorica, Chateau d'Amargois, which is also known as the Mother of Darkness Castle, the Mother of Darkness, which of course links to Kali, right, or Mahakala, quite literally the Black Bride, or the Dark Mother, right, same idea, all linked to Shiva and Shakti, and of course the interrelation of the two, the Shiva and the Shakti, forms the hexagram, the divine female and the divine male. So, or it creates the Shatkona, it's also known as. But you also have as well the mare, which is the sea. But then if you go to Mauritania and the Moors, again that Amur, Mauritania, Mauritania, right? And in there you have the Eye of the Sahara, or literally the Rishat structure as it's called, and it's by its geological name. And it would appear, I'm not going to go into the totality of the geological evidence that seems to point to this being the site of a great calamity at some point in time, and also containing a bedrock, or the outline at least, that is reminiscent and very much correlative to the descriptions of Atlantis by Plato, these concentric rings. Perhaps there's a link there. There's too many parallels, and for it to just be a coincidence, it appears to me to be a pattern. And it appears to me that they're attempting to reclaim this lost ancient wisdom of the ages. It was almost, they almost had immortality. They almost, again, built that Tower of Babel, if you will, and harnessed the power of the toroid for both creation and destruction to become gods, essentially, the Homo Deus, the God-men. But they failed, and whatever they did destroyed the entirety of the world. And it seems that the world is being held hostage by those who consort with and who are in league with powers of the subterranean realms, of the of Tartarus, of hell, of Hades, of the underworld. And they are incessantly in this rebellious and tyrannical drive to break apart the world and to re-envision this world into a sort of Faustian dystopia. For them it would be a utopia. That's what it appears to me to be. That this kingdom that they speak of, this golden age, is almost them reclaiming some sort of lost ancient wisdom, or perhaps the resumption of some sort of holy crusade to rectify, of course, tikkun, the entire world, to have a Ha'olam Haba, a world to come. That there's a world beyond this world, and all they need but do is break the veil of this world and, well, as they say, get rid of the spirit of uncleanliness to wipe out the wicked from the world. That's another thing, by the way, that you see Shiva associated with. He's associated with this idea of the sort of Dharma. He's the Dhamma Raja in some sense. He's associated with righteousness, right? And you have the same thing crop up, the same concept of righteousness and the Dharma crop up in Kabbalah, lo and behold, with the Zadik. And the idea is that everyone else are varying degrees of klipot. Either klipot hatmios, totally unclean, irredeemable shells, or the klipot or klipa noga, which are the shells of light, those who are redeemable after a purgatory via the grave. But you have this third one, this third caste, who are totally righteous, that are beyond reproach. And it seems as well that the rabbis and the priest class, so there's quite a lot of overlap, and I'm going to go through a list of notes. Probably won't get through them all, they're about 30 pages long. This will appear in one of my new books. I'm nearly finished writing. It's so large I may have to divide it into 2 volumes. But it discusses this conspiracy and tracing it back to the Harappan civilization, or the Indus Valley civilization within the Bronze Age. And I've been writing that book for probably about 1.5 years now, and it's been an ongoing process. You know, I'm learning more every day, the more I research. And, well, anyway, I'll go through this, and it just shows the overlap between the Brahmin and the rabbis Both of them appear to believe that they are God's chosen, that they are the righteous. They have right action, right thought. They even have right, or the sort of purity of line, the purity of lineage as well. You also find that too. So the Kohanim and the Brahmin are very similar, if you will. So this is what it states. Lord Brahma and the Abrahamic cult. Brahma and Abraham. There are numerous theories on the circumstances under which Brahmins of northern India travelled into Persia, the Iranian plateau comprising today's Iran and Afghanistan, and further into the Middle East. One study by Jean D. Matlock, entitled Who Was Abraham?, provides an interesting summary of evidence indicating that Lord Brahma was the source of the father of the Judeo-Christian religion, Abraham. Brahma equals Abram. Below of course there's phonetic similarities at least. Below we present excerpts from his paper, beginning with a passage quoted from the book Moisés y los Extraterrestres by Mexican author Tomás Doreste. Quote, Voltaire was of the opinion that Abraham descended from some of the numerous Brahmin priests who left India to spread their teachings throughout the world, and in support of his thesis, he presented the following elements: the similarity of names, and the fact that the city of Ur, land of the patriarchs, was near the border of Persia, the road to India, where that Brahmin had been born. The name of Brahma was highly respected in India, and his influence spread throughout Persia as far as the lands bathed by the rivers Euphrates and Tigris. The Persians adopted Brahma and made him their own. Later they would say that the god arrived from Bactria, a mountainous region situated midway on the road to India. That's from pages 46 to 47. Bactria, a region of ancient Afghanistan, was the locality of a prototypical Jewish nation called Yehuda, or Yaguda, also called Ur-Yaguda. Ur meant place or town. Therefore, the Bible was correct in stating that Abraham came from Ur of the Chaldeans, or Ur of the Chaldees. Chaldean, more correctly Chaldeva, holy calls, was not the name of a specific ethnicity, but the title of an ancient Hindu, Brahmanical, priestly caste, who lived in what are now Afghanistan, Pakistan, and the Indian state of Kashmir. Quote, the tribe of Ud, or the Brahman Abraham, was expelled from or left the Mathurya of the kingdom of Ud in India, and settling in Goshen, or the house of the sun, or Heliopolis in Egypt, gave it the name of the place which they had left in India, Mathurya. That's from Anacalypsis, Volume 1, page 405. Quote, he was of the religion or sect of Persia and of Melchizedek. That's from Volume 1, page 364 of that same book. Quote, the Persians also called him, or also claim Ibrahim, i.e. Abraham, for their founder, as well as the Jews. Thus we see that according to all ancient history, the Persians, the Jews, and the Arabians are descendants of Abraham. That's page 85 of that book. We are told that Terah, the father of Abraham, originally came from an eastern country called Ur of the Chaldees or Chaldees, to dwell in a district called Mesopotamia. Sometime after he had dwelt there, Abraham or Abram or Brahma and his wife Sarah or Sarai or Sarasvati left their father's family and came into Canaan. The identity of Abraham and Sarah with Brahma and Sarasvati was first pointed out by Jesuit missionaries, Volume 1, page 387. Quote, there are certain striking similarities between the Hindu god Brahma and his consort Sarasvati and the Jewish Abraham and Sarai that are more than mere coincidences. Although in all of India there is only one temple dedicated to Brahma, The cult is the largest, or the third largest, Hindu sect. In his History of the Jews, the Jewish scholar and theologian Flavius Josephus, 37 to 100 AD, wrote that the Greek philosopher Aristotle had said, quote, "The Jews are derived from the Indian philosophers. They are named by the Indians Kalani," unquote. That's from Book 1, line 22 of Flavius Josephus's History of the Jews. Clearchus of Soli wrote, quote, "The Jews descend from the philosophers of India. The philosophers are called in India Kalanians, and in Syria Jews. The name of their capital is very difficult to pronounce. It is called Jerusalem," unquote. Quote, Megasthenes, who was sent to India by Seleucus Nicator about 300 years before Christ, and whose accounts from New Inquiries are every day acquiring additional credit, says that the Jews were an Indian tribe or sect called Kalani, unquote. That's from Anacalypsis by Godfrey Higgins, Volume 1, page 400. Martin Hogg, PhD, wrote in the Sacred Language, Writings and Religions of the Parsis, quote, "The Magi are said to have called their religion Keshi Ibrahim. They traced their religious book to Abraham, or their religious books to Abraham, rather, who was believed to have brought them from heaven." Page 16 of that book. The Rig Veda alludes to Sarasvati as being mother, wife, sister and daughter, and elsewhere there are references to Sarasvati as Brahma's half-sister, understood to mean born of Brahma, the creator. Mr. Matlock continues, quote, "The Bible gives two stories of Abraham. In this first version, Abraham told Pharaoh that he was lying when he introduced Sarah as his sister. In the second version, he also told the king of Gerar that Sarah was really his sister. However, when the king scolded him for lying, Abraham said that Sarai, or Sarah, was in reality both his wife and his sister." Quote, and this is from Genesis 20, verse 12, "And yet indeed she is my sister. She is the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother. And she became my wife," unquote. But the anomalies don't end there. In India, a tributary of the river Sarasvati in Hagar, another tributary of the same river is Hakra. According to Jewish traditions, Hagar was Sarah's maidservant. The Muslims say she was an Egyptian princess. Notice the similarities of Hagar or Hakra and Hagar. A third mini-version of the Abraham story turns him into another Noah. We know that a flood drove Abraham out of India, unquote. And this is from Joshua 24, verses 2 to 3. Quote, "Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, your fathers dwelt on the other side of the flood in the old times, even Terah, the father of Abraham, and the father of Nachor, and they served other gods. And I took your father Abraham from the other side of the flood, and led him throughout all of the land of Canaan." Genesis 25 mentions some descendants of his concubine Keturah. Note the Muslims claim that Keturah is another name of Hagar. Jokshan, Sheba, Dedan, Efer. Some descendants of Noah were Joktan, Sheba, Dedan, and Ophir. These varying versions have caused me to suspect that the writers of the Bible were trying to unite several different branches of Judaism. About 1900 BC, the cult of Brahma was carried to the Middle East and Near East by several different Indian groups after a severe rainfall and earthquake tore northern India apart. I think it goes even further back to the Bronze Age. We're talking probably another 1,000 years onto that, maybe 500 to 1,000 years onto that. That's what I would say you're looking at. But, you know, it could, again, the records are pretty scant All we have and all we know that there was a mercantile group in and around that region of the Indus Valley civilization. Something happened. It appears, and of course this cult of Pasupati as well, perhaps they were involved in that. I speculate that they were, based on a concordance of evidence. And I believe that they moved westward, they migrated westward. Now either they migrated into Sumeria, or a branch of them did, or a branch of them migrated overland through Persia, what was Bactria at the time, what's known now as Afghanistan, the Hindu Kush, all the way to western Syria essentially, also in Acadia too, and they became the Semitic peoples. To continue on, even changing the courses of the Indus and Sarasvati rivers. The classical geographer Strabo tells us just how nearly complete the abandonment of northwestern India was. Quote, Aristobulus says that when he was sent upon a certain mission in India, he saw a country of more than 1,000 cities, together with villages that had been deserted because the Indus had abandoned its proper bed. This is from Strabo's Geography. I believe it would be chapter 15, section 1, line 19, or verse 19. Quote, the drying up of the Sarasvati around 1900 BC, which led to a major relocation of the population centred around in the Sindhu and the Sarasvati rivers, would have been the event that caused a migration westward from India. It is soon after this time that the Indic element begins to appear all over West Asia, Egypt and Greece. Indic Ideas in the Greco-Roman World by Suvash Kak, taken from India Star Online Literary Magazine, page 14. Indian historian Kutekhyat Purushottama John believes that Abraham was driven out of India. He states that the Aryans, unable to defeat the Asuras, this is what my book's about, the mercantile caste that once ruled in the Indus Valley, or Harappans, spent so many years fighting covertly against the Asuras, such as destroying their huge system of irrigation lakes, causing destructive flooding, that Abraham and his kindred just gave up and marched to the west of Asia. See Remedy the Frauds in Hinduism. Therefore, besides being driven out of northern India by floods, the Aryans also forced Indian merchants, artisans and educated classes to flee to the west of Asia. Of course, the Amorites, right? This is the Asiatics, the Amorite land within what's now Syria. Quote, the Arabian historians contend that Brahma and Abraham, their ancestor, are the same person. The Persians generally called Abraham Zeradust. Cyrus considered the religion of the Jews the same as his own. The Hindus must have come from Abraham, or the Israelites from Brahma. Anacalypsis, Volume 1, page 396. The Temple of Mecca was founded by a colony of Brahmins from India. It was a sacred place before the time of Muhammad, and they were permitted to make pilgrimages to it for several centuries after his time. Its great celebrity as a sacred place, long before the time of the Prophet, cannot be doubted. Anacalypsis, Volume 1, page 421. The city of Mecca is said by the Brahmins, on the authority of their old books, to have been built by a colony from India, and its inhabitants from the earliest era have had a tradition that it was built by Ishmael, the son of Agar. This town, in the Indus language, would be called Ishmaelistan, unquote. Again, Anacalypsis, page 424. It's from Volume 1. David Flusser says the record of Abraham has many similarities with a certain story from the Upanishads, stating that stating that, quote, one can easily discover parallels in the Upanishads to the Abraham legend. That's from his book Judaism and the Origins of Christianity, page 650. American biologist Constantine Samuel Rafinesque, 1783 to 1840, in his book, The American Nations, discusses linguistic and traditional similarities between the two religions. In one chapter, he writes, quote, "Our Noah is thus NH, PR no, which the Jews since pronounced Nu or Noah, and even Menu. Exactly the same name is given to him by the Hindus, and all meaning repose, with many collateral meanings: lawgiver, collecting people, assembly of humanity, etc. The laws of Manu are preserved by the Hindus. To him is also ascribed the substance of the Vedas, and the whole Mosaic history, till near his own death. But the Hindus have many Manus. Adam and Set were such, by the names of Adimo and Satya. And that's from Constantine Samuel Rafinesque's The American Nations, or Outlines of Their General History, Ancient and Modern, page 104. Judaism has been compared with Hinduism by Osho Rajneesh and Stephen Rosen in their books. They cite the similarities between Brahmins and Jews who viewed themselves as God's chosen people. Rosen adds that Brahmins had a community of priests, while Jews had a kingdom of priests. That's from Essential Hinduism by Stephen Rosen, page 13. It's also mentioned as well in L.A. Waddell's book, Makers of Civilization in Race and History, where we read, quote, "The luxury of this period of Ur in Mesopotamia is also reflected in the extensive use of public and private slaves, who were auctioned in the markets of Lagash, who were mostly prisoners captured in war and in the raiding expeditions, and who must have been seething for revolt in a decadent and effete empire run by a banker family of Brahmin priests in their own self-interest." Very, very, very interesting, right? So this perhaps links with what we see with the Aryan, the sort of contention between the Aryans and the Asuras. I mean, fascinating. Absolutely fascinating indeed. So this is another quote from L.A. Waddell's work, again, Makers of Civilization in Race and History. Quote, "The lowered position assigned to women as mere chattels of the husbands was characteristically Semitic and Chaldean and Eastern, excluding China and Japan, and it was diametrically opposed to the chivalry of the Aryan, Sumerian, and Gothic tradition and practice followed by Western civilization," unquote. So as we've mentioned, that Indian historian Kutikhyat Purushottama Chon, he mentioned about this, the Asuras, this mercantile caste from the Indus Valley, who were driven out by the Aryans and fled to Western Asia, the Levant, essentially. They became the Amorites. And they went to Syria. Again, you have Assyria and Syria, or again, the same idea as Sura or Asura. You even have this idea as well, you find in the Sea Peoples, to the west of Anatolia, or pardon me, Western Anatolia, you had the Asuan Confederacy, which were they were made up of 22 tribes. Right, of course, there's 22 Hebrew letters or Semitic letters in the Aleph Bet. So again, maybe a coincidence, who knows? I know that the Kemetic peoples, Asiya, where we get our term Asia from, was also linked with that Asuan idea. And Asuan isn't very phonetically distinct from Asura or Sura. Interesting. So this would have been sometime between 5,000 and 4,500 years ago, right? And I'm going through this because it's very important before we get into the sort of meat and potatoes, if you will, of the Golden Age notes. and the golden age of Saturn's America, because you have to know all of this. Basically, what you're looking at here is a 5,000-year-old conspiracy, right? Basically, it goes as far back as the Anno Mundi calendar. That's how far we're talking back. So it's been, a long time in the making, should we say. So following the trail of the Asuras, in attempting to trace the Asuras back to their origin, we encounter some interesting linguistic roots for the word Asuras. We find that, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, the word Asura and Ahura are one and the same. Ahura was the name given to a certain Zoroastrian god or class of gods. It would then follow that the Ahuras or Asuras were the devotees of this god or gods. As it turns out, there was a deity in ancient Nineveh by the name of Ashura, and the Assyrian capital was named Ashur. Anyway, Asura or Ahura can also be written as Hazura, which is quite interesting, because this word can be transliterated into Yazura or Yahura. This gives us the prefix of Ya, right? Or, of course, Ea, and the Akkadian also pronounced Ya, and that links perhaps to Enki. Of course, we can actually say for certain that it links to Enki, because the Akkadians make note of it themselves, right? That they syncretized this, and the word was a transliteration. It was essentially a loanword from Sumerian. So we could say that the Asuras were the devotees of Ya, or some sort of Ya, deity. Whether or not the Asuras were of Indo-Persian origin, they certainly lived in this region during the early 4th millennium BC, and were clearly operating and profiting off the major trade network in the Indus Valley, moving westward into Western Asia. This is clearly the main reason why they were expelled from this region, or one of the main reasons they migrated to the west of Asia, right? Again, if you're at the end of the trade node, all the profit is coming downstream from you, or downstream to you, rather. And all you have to do from that is work your way up and begin to control, or in this case, work your way down, migrate your way down, controlling all of the various trade nodes of that grand network of trade. Then, of course, you control that entire trade network. The perfect commercial hub for that is Jerusalem. It is the quote-quote Holy Land, which isn't really that holy, it's more of commercial, strategic interest. Anyway, according to the Gathas, the oldest Zoroastrian hymns, Zoroaster exhorted his followers to pay homage only to the Ahura deity or deities, and to reject the opposition deities or deity, the Devas, whose followers only acted upon the command of lies, according to this Zoroastrian hymn. If we understand Asura in this context to be a reference to Ya, or these Ya characters, then it would appear that there was a strong connection between the proto-Hebrews and perhaps the Zoroastrians at this time. And of course, as we've read, Cyrus the Great believed wholeheartedly that his religion, Zoroastrianism, was exactly the same as Judaism, that they were one and the same. I mean, that's quite startling, isn't it? Very, very startling. So the Hindu and Zoroastrian connection, and Proto-Hebrew connection too. We know, of course, that Abrahamism is, decidedly intolerant of other religions. I mean, they, of course, boast that they are the one true religion, that they worship the one true God. Of course, Hindus also believe that. All of the various gods that they worship, in fact, have a golden thread. They come from a single absolute reality, if you will. I believe it's called the Brahman. The absolute reality, the ultimate reality, the ultimate God, this sort of impersonal ineffable God that's incomprehensible to man. It is the encompassing of all things. It is the Mercurius, if you will. The Abraxas, the hidden God, this idea of the black sun as well. So ultimately they're all monotheistic when you get to that higher level of understanding of the theological doctrine, if you will, and the philosophy that surrounds it, and the cosmogony that surrounds it too. However, not only are all other religions and gods illegitimate to Abrahamism in their estimation, but worshippers of other religions were to be shunned and even, of course, unfortunately exterminated, very callously and indiscriminately too. And indeed, this attitude prevailed among the Asuras against the Devas. For example, in the Fravarena, a Zoroastrian credo, an adherent declares, quote, "I profess myself a Mazda worshipper, a follower of the teachings of Zoroaster, rejecting the Devas. This rejection of the Devas automatically implies an acceptance of the Asuras by default, and thus, in effect, an acceptance of an early form of, you could say, a monotheistic Yah deity, right? If we assume this connection between Ahura and Yahura, or Yahweh, or Yah. In fact, the three major deities of Zoroastrianism are Ahura Mazda, Mithra, or Mithras, and Apam Napat, which are known as the Ahuric Triad, or the Zoroastrian Trinity, if you will. Another Ahuric deity of this religion is Ashi, or Yashi, a god of reward and recompense. Interesting, Yashi. Again, it could just be phonetic similarity there, right? However, in Zoroastrianism, a battle is described between the forces of good and evil, of course just like in the Bible. Indra is said to be the protagonist of the good. In Hinduism, on the side of the Devas, while the dragon Virtra was on the side of the Asuras, and he was the antagonist of evil. Interestingly, that entire thing gets flipped around, because it's, in fact, Indra. In Zoroastrianism, it's Indra that turns into a dragon to face Ahura Mazda, right? So you have this complete inversion with Zoroastrianism and, of course, the Dharmic religion, Hinduism. I mean, what was going on there? Well, it appears that, like the Asuras, who moved westward after they were ousted, these mercantilist peoples, obviously bringing with them this sort of proto-Shivite Pasupati, the lord of all animals, and these other esoteric notions that I've already touched upon, really, but linking with the World Tarot card and so on and so forth. But you notice that the Asuras were basically openly worshipping evil or chaotic deities that were capricious, right, that were mercurial, meaning they induced change into the world. They were forces of decay, of transformation, rather than of stability and goodness. In other words, when it came to Zoroastrianism, there was a complete and utter, again, there was a complete inversion of the Devas and the Asuras. The Devas became the evil ones, the Asuras became those who were, lauded as the good. That wasn't the case in Hinduism. So there was something very strange going on there, appears, and it perhaps stems from this Asura, this mercantilist class of Asuras that were ousted by the Aryans, as this Indian historian mentions. So there were a total inversion, very, very strange indeed. So it also mentions in the Vedic tradition that a lot of the Asuras were rightly known to be obsessed with a craving for ill-gotten wealth. And we also find, as well with the Asuras, that they were incessantly attempting to reach Mount Sumeru, also known as Mount Meru. And this was heaven. So they were constantly attempting to make it into heaven. By the way, this is extremely similar, and by similar I mean it's almost verbatim to the Titanomachy, and this idea that the chthonic deities or titans of Tartarus are attempting to prevail over the heavenly deities of the Olympiads. So it's the same as the Asuras and the Devas in this sense. Dev, by the way, comes from Sanskrit meaning enlightenment. So it's literally the beings that are enlightened, the enlightened beings. The Asuras, I forget where that stems from etymologically now, but it has the A negative prefix. So from Sanskrit, and also appears within Greek and such. Yeah, so those who are not enlightened, they're not of the Sura, they're not of light, they're not of enlightenment. So in essence anyway, within the Buddhist tradition, it mentions that they literally fell from Mount Sumeru due to their drunkenness, right? Again, the same idea as the fallen angels and such, whose Asuras, and of course Kronos, Saturn, and whose and those Asuras who had a calling to preserve or persevere to a higher path, because the belief was that all gods were Asura in the beginning, right? They were not of the divine. They had to become divine. They had to become enlightened. They had to become the Devas. And those were 33 in number. They became known as the Devas, those who kept to the Dharma. And of course, the reason for 33, as we've discussed previously, is of course there's 33 vertebrae leading up to the cranial cavity. And then beyond that, of course, into the thalamus, the inner chamber. This is why, as I've mentioned, Dante Alighieri in his Divine Comedy, he walks up the 33 steps out of hell. It's the same idea. I mean, this... Somebody mentioned in that comment sloppy syncretism. There's nothing sloppy about this. It's literally everywhere. You would have to have your head in the sand. You'd have to be living under a rock not to see this stuff. And he mentioned, I'm trying to push fear surrounding, the gods and the spirits. Well, this is the thing. The gods are not external to you. What we're discussing here is ultimately the mosaic of the human psyche, right? The macrocosm of the monad, if you will, the monadic symbol. The macrocosm is found within the microcosm. It's a reflection, as above, so below, as within, so without. And this is why, of course, we anthropomorphisize all of these elemental aspects of the world, of ourself, of psychology, of the cosmos psychic environment in which we reside within. Essentially, they're psychological keys. They're symbols. So you can access a threshold that is beyond, the general comprehension of man. That's the idea surrounding this. So you can understand the environment in which you live to a far more precise and delineated manner or degree. I was in college recently, and in between classes, I was doing a bit of writing on this new book on the Asuras, going with the title An Empire of Corruption Mythology Revisited. It is about the Asuras, but I go into detail other things within it surrounding that of esotericism, symbolism, semiotics, comparative mythology and all of that, relating it back to the agenda, the conspiracy essentially. So I was writing, and somebody in the class, well, he's not in my class, he's in the other class, but there's so few of us that they have to combine the classes essentially. Anyway, he sees me writing and he says, we're meant to be doing a report. I've already done the report, but he mentions, are you working on your report? I says, no, this is, I write books and that, just as a pastime. And he looked at me funny, like I had horns on my head. And he says, wait, so that's work you're doing outside of college? I said, yeah. He said, oh, right, that's a little bit weird. So, of course, I didn't, I just laughed it off and continued. But I remember thinking at that point, wow, the systems of power have really done a number on us. It really is something. You're dealing with individuals who are essentially devoid of any logic, any desire to critically think, any wisdom, any rationale for even living. They don't even understand where they dwell. They're in a state of completely desperate and helpless amnesia. It's honestly extraordinary. Extraordinary. And, they look at you as though you're weird because you think. Isn't that something? Isn't that quite funny? It's startling, isn't it? It's the one thing that sets human beings apart. It's not anything else. It's not our inherent strengths. It's not that we have giant claws or huge fangs or, a ferocious stature. No. It's the mind. It's the connection to something greater than ourselves. It's the ability to craft tools and strategize plans. And these absolute, what do you call them? It's essentially Nietzsche's last man. They're the multiplication of 0 by 0. More insect than human. I hate to say that, but it's true. That's a supposed institute of higher learning. And they look at you funny because you have the tenacity to think. Sapere aude, that you dare to know. It's honestly extraordinary. It is absolutely extraordinary. And somebody mentioned in a comment, it was on BitChute, and I have a great deal of respect for the guy. And I've known him I've spoken to him for years now, through comments on my BitChute channel. And he mentioned, why don't you put more effort? Guy, if you're intelligence, why don't you put more effort into actual actionable things, actionable solutions, instead of, dwelling on these obscure topics? Well, the reason I don't is because I'm not trying to save the majority, because there is no saving the majority. As I've quite clearly just shown there, by you even using your brain, by daring to think in front of the uninformed majority, the ignorant majority, you sort of appear on their radar, if you will, as a potential threat, that you're going against the hive mind, against the consensus of the day, of ignorance. There's no saving those people. And I'm sure as hell not putting my head above the parapet, so it can just be basically shot off by the system of power. No. This system of power came into being not through direct action. Came into being through the Saturnine principle of patience. Came into being through meticulous planning from behind the scenes, the anglometes, the crooked plotting, the devious plotting from the shadows. It was not brought into being vis-a-vis running into battle in a foolhardy manner, like some last great forlorn that were, something from Lord of the Rings. You're going to, right at the last hour, you're going to overturn this. No. You have to go through hardship. I'm not looking for people who want change. I'm looking for people who want to change. Those are the people I'm speaking to. Because the only way we're going to defeat this is not by 1,000 people in an angry rabble. No. You have to go down to get out in this system. Meaning, in essence, that the branch cannot reach heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. This is all part of tribulation. Tribulation itself must be looked at as a positive thing, meaning it gives you the kick up the arse you require for that positive change. The only way that that positive change will come about, universally speaking, is if the individual cogs within the societal wheel change. We cannot focus on husks that know not who they face, who their enemy is, who are directionless, who are the equivalent of the human equivalent of headless chickens. No. What we're seeking is a minority of Brahman, essentially. Modern day sages who know damn well what is going on, who can take that. Of course, they may pass it on to other people to migrate this truth, to germinate the fertile minds of others, and from that begin to amass a base of resources, mythology, culture, and create I guess you would call it a parabiotic society, a parallel society, if you will. In a sense, parasite of the main hive, until we can suck it dry and decay it from within. And then, of course, create positive change from there. That's the only way. There is no quick solution to this. There is no get-rich-quick scheme. If you're in this for the long haul. I've already resigned myself to the fact that until my dying day, until I take my last breath upon this mortal coil, this earthly purgatory, I will have done everything in my power to overturn this system, to create a new system that works within my self-interest and, of course, the interests of the species as a whole, that protects stability. Because I work, I guess, spiritually, for a completely different force to what the system works for. I don't crave power. I don't crave wealth. I guess that's our problem. That's our primary problem. They do, we don't. But this is the issue as well. If we begin to crave wealth, will we be corrupted just like them? The answer is yes, and it is very much akin to what you see within Hinduism of the Samudra Manthana, literally the churning of the cosmic ocean. And this is where the Asuras and Devas, they wrapped a serpent around Mount Meru, which acted as almost the drill. And, of course, the serpent is Mercury. It is this inherent pervasiveness of change. Similar to time, but, more nuanced and complex. It's also linked to the intellect as well, the mind. And they churned up the ocean. They created the friction necessary for change. They created the friction necessary to maintain Mount Meru. That's another thing. There is this idea, this notion of loosh as well. Perhaps there's something to that. This Perhaps we're in a farm, an enclosure, a paradise, right? A paradise. And the paradise is where we, the crops, are harvested. You also notice as well, by the way, I found this very strange, that, for example, of course, the Western Europeans don't appear to be producing children. So we are fallow. We've run our course. We're now infertile. We're a sterile crop. And of course, that's by design, right? It's by scientific design. And at the same time, while we're losing all of our family values, the replacement populations that are arriving, they have all of their family values intact. So, of course, it appears that they are to become the new crop, but they aren't necessarily slated to become the new rulers. This is the issue with that. But yeah, perhaps this has always been the case. Perhaps you need these types of cycles. Perhaps we're all playing an archetype of the sage or the hermit or what have you. But no, there's... Believe you me, I'm left scratching my head at how the hell this clique has managed to survive. I mean, honestly, they have the survivability, the durability. They're as indefatigable as as cockroaches. I mean, they could survive anything. It's quite admirable in some respects. I mean, they're survivors, absolutely. And these enemies of the gods, this is their playground. Make no qualms about it. They own this world. The Asuras, the merchant class, the merchant elite, the hidden empire, run this world. And conceivably they always will. I mean, look at it. Look at the way society functions. It is always the most reprehensible, nefarious elements that rise to the top like some form of sour and bitter cream. Just, I don't know. Why? Why? People seem to buy the chronology of it all. What is the reason for that? Is there something within the cosmos itself that almost predisposes, well, all living things to this sort of cycle, but especially human beings? I mean, it does make you wonder. It does make you wonder. So I'm just looking through if we've missed anything here. Oh yes, that's another thing to mention. The Valmiki, an ancient document from India that dates to the 2nd millennium BC, proclaims the sky chariot is gilded and lustrous throughout. It leaps above the hill in the wooded valley, winged like lightning, covered in smoke and flowing lamps, speedy and round of prow. So it discusses even the Ramayana. It states about ancient flying craft, right? They could go the speed of wind, and it could attain heights that made the ocean look like a small pool of water. And it could stop and hover motionless in the sky, and it was furnished with window compartments and excellent seats. One person named Vima, according to the text, flew along in his car, resplendent as the sun and loud as thunder. The flying chariot shone like a flame in the night sky of summer. These craft were said to rise vertically in the air with a whole family on board and with a tremendous noise. Pilots, the text states, had to be well trained before ever being able to sit at the controls. The Samaranga Sutra Adhara is a collection of texts compiled in the 11th century AD, but dating back to a very remote period in India's history. It contains 230 stanzas that describe in detail every aspect of flying, from how the flying crafts were powered to the proper clothing and diet of the pilots. It states, and by the way, this is probably why you had the likes of, for example, Islamic armies go into India and come across libraries and just set fire to 10,000 tomes of extreme ancient history. The reason for it, and it's same with the Library of Alexandria and the Christians burning that, and later on the Muslims, because they have to get rid of all of this. They have to get rid of the precursor civilization to literally wipe the simulation clean, right? It's to reset. It's so you don't begin to have a collection of questions. You begin to wonder, well, are we at the pinnacle of sophistication? Are we at the pinnacle of technological progress? Or are we in a dark age? And if we're in a dark age, is that the reason? Is our religion the reason for it? Is Yahweh really that all-powerful a deity when he can't provide us the knowledge for these types of amazing aircraft? Or, of course, as well, you begin to ask questions. How does this precursor civilization relate to those who are in charge of us today? And if people know that this is possible, they may begin to look for ways to recreate this technology, or one of these texts may contain within it ingredients for the fuel or a design to bring this technology to life. And as we'll see, Isaac Newton, who by the way was a Kabbalist, also mentioned this too. But anyway, from this text from the Samaranga Sutradhara, quote, "The aircraft which can go by its own force like a bird on the earth or water or through the air is called a Vimana. That which can travel in the sky from place to place is called a Vimana by the sages of old. The body must be strong and durable and built of light wood, shaped like a bird in flight, with wings outstretched. Within must be placed the mercury engine, with its heating apparatus made of iron underneath. In the larger aircraft, because it is built heavier, 4 stronger containers of mercury must be built in the interior. When these are heated by controlled fire from the iron containers, the Vimana possesses thunder power through the mercury. The iron engine must have properly welded joints to be filled with mercury, and when fire is conducted to the upper part, it develops power with the roar of a lion. By means of the energy latent in mercury, the driving whirlwind is set in motion, and the traveller sitting inside the Vimana may travel in the air to such a distance as to look like a pearl in the sky, unquote. That idea of the driving whirlwind, basically what you're seeing there, that whirlwind is the vortex, it's the toroid, it's a toroidal moment. I discuss this later on in the section in this book on the golden age of Saturn's America, Tempas Edax Rerum, or literally time the dissolver of all things, where it discusses this, and it relates it to the Saturn or Rota square. It relates it to other things as well, the hexagram and all of this. All of the sacred symbolism it all surrounds this science. Isaac Newton once wrote about this latent power in mercury. Quote, "Because of the way by which mercury may be impregnated, it has been thought fit to be concealed by others that have known it, and therefore may be possibly an inlet to something more noble, not to be communicated without immense danger to the world," unquote. Not to be communicated without immense danger to the world, unquote. So that's probably as well why they destroyed a lot of these libraries. They need that disparity in technology for them to maintain control. In the early 1970s, Soviet explorers excavating a cave near Tashkent in Uzbek, the Soviet Socialist Republic, discovered a number of conical ceramic pots, each carefully sealed and each containing a single drop of mercury. A description and illustrations of the mysterious pots were published in the Soviet periodical, The Modern Technologist. Another key location where liquid mercury has been found while excavating ancient ruins is Lamanai, a Mayan site located in Belize. It may be that the hidden power in Mercury that the ancients utilized has been rediscovered in modern times, but that the knowledge of it is being suppressed for obvious reasons. So you can see this is probably what Atlantis was messing around with, and this is why they probably destroyed themselves, right? The whirlwind. And perhaps as well this is what CERN is looking into, along with everything else, right? This understanding the fabric of reality in a very deep and fundamental sense in terms of its materiality, its particle effects. Wikipedia has this to say about a mercury compound known as red mercury. Quote, Samuel Cohen, the father of the neutron bomb, has been claiming for some time that red mercury is a powerful explosive-like chemical known as a balotechnic. The energy released during its reaction is enough to directly compress the secondary without the need for a fission primary. He claims that he has learned that Soviet scientists perfected the use of red mercury and used it to produce a number of softball-sized pure fusion bombs, which he claims were made in large numbers. He goes on to claim that the reason this is not more widely known is that elements within the US power structure are deliberately keeping it under wraps due to the scary implications such a weapon would have on nuclear proliferation. Since a red mercury bomb would require no fissile material, it would seemingly be impossible to protect against its widespread proliferation, given current arms control methodologies. Instead of trying to do so, they simply claim it doesn't exist, while acknowledging existence privately, or its existence privately rather, unquote. Coming back to the Ramayana, we find that the reference is made to a 7-story Vimana. Again, 7 stories, interesting. 7 or Shiva, the mother of all ancient aircraft, which was known as Pushka Vimana. The text refers to it as a great aerial mansion that was decorated with pearls and diamonds. It was also said to have been featured with artistic windows made of refined gold. It would seem that the ancient Egyptians were paid a visit by some of these ancient Hindu flying craft during the reign of Thutmose III. Thutmose III perhaps is the biblical King David. Ahmed Osman goes into that, but even the term Thutmose, it would be spelt, or at least the Tut or the Thoth part would be spelled TWT, or literally Tut, when typically the Kemetic words were transliterated into Hebrew. That transliteration changed the T's to D's. You see that with Aten and Aden, or later to become Adon. So TWT would become DWD. So literally Dawad Moses, or David Moses. But anyway, I won't go into that here. So perhaps the memory of how such flying craft were constructed was long forgotten by this time, and perhaps even by this Hyksos king, or this crypto-Hyksos king. But anyway, a papyrus dating to his reign states, quote, in the year 22 of the 3rd month of winter, 6th hour of the day, the scribes of the House of Life found it was a circle of fire that was coming in the sky. It had no head, the breath of its mouth had a foul odour. Its body was one rod long and 1 rod wide. It had no voice. Their hearts, the hearts of scribes, became confused through it. Then they laid themselves on their bellies. They went to the Pharaoh to report it. His Majesty ordered an examination of all which is written in the papyrus rolls, or scrolls rather, of the House of Life. His Majesty was meditating upon what happened. Now after some days had passed, these things became more numerous in the skies than ever. They shone more in the sky than the brightness of the sun, and extended to the limits of 4 supports of the heavens, powerful, was the position of the fire circles. The army of the pharaoh looked on with him in their midst. It was after supper. Thereupon, these fire circles ascended higher in the sky towards the south. The pharaoh caused incense to be brought to make peace on the hearth, and what happened was ordered by the pharaoh to be written in the annals of the house life, so that it be remembered forever, unquote. Regarding this text's mention of these circles of fire shining more than the brightness of the sun, let us recall how the Ramayana talks of certain flying crafts that were resplendent as the sun. Alexander the Great's army, while crossing a river into India, the Hydaspes, in 329 BC, saw two silver shields in the sky that dove repeatedly towards them, causing great panic in the army. Later on in 322 BC, when Alexander was besieging Tyre and Phoenicia, another flying shield, moving in triangular formation with smaller shields, had appeared. Supposedly, the larger object shot beams of light at the city, shattering its walls and other defences, at which time Alexander's army, quickly taking advantage of the situation, seized the city. The objects then disappeared. These shields could very well have been Vimanas, since the Hindu Mahabharata describes one model of this line of craft as being spherical in shape, which would have looked like metallic shields to ground-based observers. The Roman author Julius Obsquens, believed to have lived in the 4th century AD, drew on Livy as well as other sources of his time to compile his book Protegorium Liber. In this work, he describes 3 historical sightings of flying craft, which we will now review. In 216 BC, quote, things like ships were seen in the sky over Italy, at Arpe, east of Rome and Apulia. A round shield was seen in the sky at Capua. The sky was all on fire, and one saw figures like ships, unquote. In 99 BC, when Simurius and L. Valerius were consuls in Tarquinia, there fell in different places a thing like a flaming torch, and it came suddenly from the sky. Towards sunset, a round object like a globe or round or circular shield took its path in the sky from west to east, unquote. In 90 BC, in the territory of Spoletium, north of Rome and Umbria, a globe of fire of golden colour fell to the earth, gyrating. It then seemed to increase in size, rose from the earth and ascended into the sky, where it obscured the disk of the sun with its brilliance. It revolved towards the eastern quadrant of the sky, unquote. Anyway, since air flight existed in ancient India, it appears, we can logically conclude that such vehicles must have been employed in warfare, the very wars we have been talking about between the Asuras and the Devas. But do we have any records of aerial battles? Indeed we do, and we have them on a ground scale. G.R. Josier, director of the International Academy of Sanskrit Research in Mysore, southern India, has translated into English the 3,000-year-old Vimanika Shastra, meaning the science of aeronautics. It has 8 chapters, 6,000 lines, on the construction of 3 types of aircraft with obvious militaristic applications. The information covered includes the design of a helicopter-type cargo plane and passenger planes for as much as 500 people, plans for a craft that flew in the air, travelled underwater, or floated platoon-like on the water's surface, the qualifications and training of pilots, the inclusion on the aircraft of what can only be described as cameras, radios, and a type of radar, instructions on how to make the aircraft invisible to enemies, or radar jammer or cloaking device, stealth capabilities of some description, how to paralyze other aircraft, how to zigzag in the sky like a snake, how to see inside an enemy's aircraft, how to spy on all activities going on down below on the ground, reconnaissance capabilities. Also given was the correct proportions of certain chemicals which, when discharged outside the aircraft, would give the appearance of a cloud, or, for camouflage purposes. In one episode of the Hindu Mahabharata, the Vrishnis, a tribe whose warriors included a hero named Krishna, were beset by the forces of a leader named Salva. From there, the cruel Salva had arrived on the scene, riding on the Sova chariot, and from it he killed many Vrishni youths and devastated all the parks in the city. The story goes on to tell of how the Vrishni heroes were well equipped to launch a counterattack against Salva. At one point, the Vrishni warrior was about to finish Salva off with a special weapon, but then decided against it, because not a man in battle is safe from this arrow. Soon Krishna took to the skies in pursuit of Salva, but Salva's Sova, his chariot, his flying chariot, quote, clung to the sky at a league's length. He threw at him Krishna rockets, missiles, spears, spikes, battle axes, three-bladed javelins, flamethrowers without pausing. The sky seemed to hold 100 suns, 100 moons, and 100 myriad stars. Neither day nor night could be made out, or the points of compass. That's interesting because, of course, this idea of the points of compass refers to electromagnetism. So whatever it was within that locality where this battle was taking place and these weapons were being discharged, it's actually established a sort of EMP-like effect, right? An electromagnetic pulse, which, it seemed to completely fry the compasses, completely destabilize the electromagnetic field within the area. Very peculiar. Krishna then warded off Salva's attack with the equivalent of anti-ballistic missiles, destroying Salva's rockets, missiles and spears in mid-flight, where before they impacted, Krishna warded them off as they loomed towards him with his swift striking shafts. As they flashed through the sky, Krishna cut them into pieces. There was a great din in the sky above, unquote. Nonetheless, Krishna was still in distress, for Salva's Sova somehow became invisible. Krishna then loaded a special weapon. It appears to have been an ancient version of a smart bomb. Quote, Krishna quickly laid on an arrow, which killed by seeking out sound. All of Salva's army lay dead, killed by the blazing, sun-like arrows that were triggered by the sound. Other advanced weapons mentioned in ancient texts from India, which weren't necessarily employed from there, include chemical and biological agents. One text talks of how, when one weapon was engaged, poison was produced covering the earth with deadly fumes which stupefied the poison that would have destroyed the world. Another text describes Sumara, a missile that caused crippling, and Mohamastra, a weapon that caused complete paralysis, and Avidyastra was a weapon that supposedly attacked the nervous system of its victims. Prasvapana was said to induce sleep, and finally Asikarastra seems to have produced napalm-like effects. Beam weapons, directed energy weapons. A weapon called Kapila's Lance is described as having been capable of turning 50,000 men to ash in just a few moments of time. Was this some type of laser weapon? The Mahabharata also describes an 18-day war between the Kauravas and the Pandavas, who inhabited the upper regions of the Ganges. Not long after this war, a second war was waged against the Vrishnis and the Andakas in the same region. In both conflicts, Vimanas, described in this particular text as celestial cars, and aerial chariots with sides of iron clad with wings were used to launch a weapon of terrible destructive power. The first of these two wars fought in these aircraft is described as above, or described as follows rather. Quote, "The valiant Adwatan, remaining steadfast in his Vimana, landed upon the water and from there unleashed the Agneya weapon, incapable of being resisted by the very gods. Taking careful aim against its foes, he let loose the blazing missile of smokeless fire with tremendous force. Dense arrows of flame, like a great shower, issued forth upon creation, encompassing the enemy. Meteors flashed down from the sky. A thick gloom quickly settled upon the Pandava hosts. All points of the compass were lost in darkness." There we go again, right? There was an electromagnetic pulse from this that disrupted the compasses, that disrupted the electromagnetic field. Fierce winds began to blow. Clouds roared upwards, showering dust and gravel. Birds croaked madly, and beasts shuddered from the destruction. The very elements seemed disturbed. The sun seemed to waver in the heavens. The earth shook, scorched by the terrible violent heat of this weapon. Elephants burst into flame and ran to and fro in a frenzy, seeking protection from the terror. Over a vast area, other animals crumpled to the ground and died. The waters boiled and the creatures residing therein also died. From all points of the compass, the arrows of the flame rained continuously and fiercely. The missile of Adwatan burst with the power of thunder, and the hostile warriors collapsed like trees burnt in a raging fire. The thousands of war vehicles fell down on all sides, unquote. The Mahabharata goes on to describe a second battle of this nature. Quote, "Gurkha, flying in his swift and powerful Vimana, hurled against the three cities of the Vrishnis and the Andakas a single projectile charged with all the power of the universe, an incandescent column of smoke and fire as brilliant as 10,000 suns, rose in all of its splendour. It was the unknown weapon, the iron thunderbolt, a gigantic messenger of death, which reduced to the ashes the entire race of the Vrishnis and the Andakas. The corpses were so burnt that they were no longer recognisable. Hair and nails fell out, pottery broke without cause, birds disturbed circled in the air and were turned white. Foodstuffs were poisoned. To escape, the warriors threw themselves and streamed to wash themselves in their equipment." On a similar note, the Ramayana states that when the god Rama was threatened by an army of monkeys, he put a magic arrow into action. This produced a flash of lightning, stronger than the heat from 100,000 suns, turning everything to dust. So, you're dealing with perhaps ancient atomic warfare or something. And interestingly, Robert Oppenheimer, the father of the atomic bomb, was a Sanskrit scholar. Very interesting. And he mentioned that once when speaking of the first atomic test conducted near Alamogordo, New Mexico, on July 16th, 1945, he quoted from the Mahabharata saying, quote, "I have unleashed the power of the universe. Now I have become the destroyer of worlds," unquote. That obviously as well relates to time. Again, the golden age of Saturn. This same notion. When asked during an interview at Rochester University, 7 years after the first atomic test, whether it was the first such bomb ever to be detonated, he replied by saying, "Well, yes, the first in modern history." So of course he knew the ancients had developed such a bomb. Perhaps the Abrahamics, the priestly class, related perhaps to the Brahmins in some sense. They had a deep knowledge of this. They have a record of it. the wise elders, the learned elders, the secret society of Moshe, they know of this. And it was the intent of the Manhattan Project to reproduce such a bomb and to return the world to the same living hell. This is why most of the Mahabharata, to this very day, has not been translated, nor has it been released to the public in any form. They don't want you to know the ancients had vast and grand technologies that not just rival, but even supersede what we have today. Interestingly, precisely in the area where these ancient devastating conflicts are reported to have taken place, in the vicinity of Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, again, Mohenjo-daro, meaning the mound of the dead, Lothal also meaning the mound of the dead. Why? Right? Is it because of this ancient atomic warfare, or whatever we may call it? Anyway, archaeologists have discovered numerous burnt ruins which have yet to be fully explored and excavated. The observations that have thus far been made indicate that these ruins were not burned by ordinary fire. In fact, no natural burning flame or volcanic eruption could have produced the types of phenomena observed in these ruins. Only the heat released through fission or atomic energy could have done this damage, namely stone walls whose outer surfaces have been literally melted or vitrified and split. In these same ruins, there have also been found charred radioactive human bones scattered about in the streets. Speaking on this matter, Jonathan Gray wrote in Dead Men's Secrets, quote, "Skeletons in Mohenjo-daro and Harappa are extremely radioactive. The ruins of these ancient Indus Valley cities are immense. They are thought to have contained well over 1 million people each. Practically nothing is known of their histories, except that both were destroyed. Suddenly, in Mohenjo-daro, in an epicenter 150 feet wide, everything was crystallized, fused or melted. 180 feet from the center, the bricks are melted on one side, indicating a huge and intense blast. An ancient Indian text speaks of a city's people being given 7 days to get out, a clear warning of total destruction. Excavations down to the street level revealed 44 scattered skeletons, as if doom had come so suddenly they could not get into their houses. All the skeletons were flattened to the ground. A father, mother, and child were found flattened in the street, face down and still holding hands. The skeletons, after thousands of years, are still among the most radioactive that have ever been found, on par with those of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, unquote. Notice the reference to 7 days. What does that sound like? Again, 7 days. Shiva, Poseidon, all of these deities, right? It's always 7. The 7 planetary genii, so on and so forth. Anyway, furthermore, according to the researcher David Childress in Technology of the Gods, quote, "At Mohenjo-daro, the streets were littered with black lumps of glass. These globs of glass were discovered to be clay pots that had melted under intense heat. In the Tibetan stanzas of Dzyan, translated in the 19th century, but the original dating back several millennia, a description is given of a militaristic holocaust between two nations. Quote, "The great king of the dazzling face, the chief of all yellow-faced, was sad seeing the evil intentions of the evil dark-faced. He sent his air vehicles to all his brother chiefs, with pious men within, saying, 'Prepare, arise men of the good law,' or Dharma, quite literally. And like what we see of the Aryans were those who maintained the right action, maintained the law. and escape while the land has not yet been overwhelmed by the waters. The Lords of the Storm are also approaching their war vehicles. The Lords of the Storm. Of course, Yahweh was a storm deity, right? And you have Enlil, this Lord of the Air. You also have Satan, by the way. I believe Satan's also referred to as the Prince of the Air, interestingly. So the Lords of the Storm are also approaching. Their war vehicles are nearing the land. 1 night and 2 days only shall the Lords of the Dark Faced arrive on this patient land. She is doomed when the waters descend on her. The Lords of the Dark-Eyed have prepared their magic, Agniastra. They are also versed in Ashtar, the highest magical knowledge, i.e. technology. Ashtar is almost very much like Ishtar, or Ashtaroth, or that idea. Come and use ours, or yours rather, come and use yours. Let every Lord of the Dazzling Face ensnare the air vehicle of every Lord of the Dark-Faced, lest any of them escape. The great king fell upon his dazzling face and wept. When the kings were assembled, the waters of the earth had already been disturbed. The nations crossed the dry lands. They went beyond the watermark. The kings reached then the safe lands in their air vehicles and arrived in the lands of fire and metal. Stars, atomic bombs, showered on the lands of the dark-faced while they slept. The speaking beasts, radios perhaps, remained quiet. The lords waited for others, but they came not, for their masters slept. The waters rose and covered the valleys. In the high lands there dwelt those who escaped, the men of the yellow faces and of the straight eye. So perhaps the East Asians and Europeans, right, the men of the straight eye. Elsewhere in this same document we read, quote, "Separation did not bring peace of these people, to these people rather, apparently of Harappa or Mohenjo-daro, and finally their anger reached a point where the ruler of the original city took with him a small number of his warriors, and they rose into the air in a huge shining metal vessel. While they were many leagues from the city of their enemies, they launched a great shining lance that rode on a beam of light. It burst apart in the city of their enemies with a great ball of flame that shot up to the heavens, almost to the stars. All those who were in the city were horribly burned, and even those who were not in the city but nearby were burned also. Those who looked upon the lance and the ball of fire were blinded forever afterward. Those who entered the city on foot became ill and died. Even the dust of the city was poisoned, as were the rivers that flowed through it. Men dared not go near it, and gradually crumbled into dust, and it gradually crumbled into dust and was forgotten by men. When the leader saw what he had done to his own people, he retired to his palace and refused to see anyone. Then he gathered about him those warriors who remained, and their wives and children, and they entered their vessels and rose one by one into the sky, and sailed away, rather. Nor did they return," unquote. The Asuras were not only fighting in these wars directly, but the elites among them must have been financing them, which has got to be one of the reasons why this mercantile class was expelled by from the Indus Valley, or what was left of it after these battles. So perhaps they left as refugees of this now submerged city, submerged in radioactive fallout perhaps, or completely destroyed in its totality. It appears something like that went on. It also appears, by the way, that there was around about 3000 BC, again around about the time that the Asuras were forced to pack their bags, so to speak. It would appear that all the way throughout Mesopotamia and the subcontinent, India, that there was some form of sort of global die-off. And we see some examples of that in a Sumerian text, where it describes a battle between two opponents, Ninurta and Zu. Ninurta is literally Saturn, as we've mentioned. Ninurta, we are told, shot arrows at Zu, but they were stopped in the midst of their flight. Right? Again, these ideas of interceptor, anti-ballistic missile devices. As the battle continued, Ya, or Ea, Enki, instructed Ninurta, or Saturn, to add a Tilum to his arsenal and shoot it into the pinions, or small cog wheels of Zu's wings. Following his advice, Zu's wings were struck and he came spiralling downward in defeat. Interestingly, the Tilum that Ninurta was instructed to use against Zu actually translates in the modern Hebrew as missile. The Tilum, missile. And when written, its ancient pictorial symbol looked astonishingly like a modern-day missile. So we even see the same thing occur within the Epic of Gilgamesh, dating from about 2000 BC. That's from the Babylonian record, where it states, on the land fell a calamity, one unknown to man, one that had never been seen before, one which could not be withstood. It brought death to all who were in the vicinity, a death which roamed the street, was let loose in the road. It stood beside a man, yet none could see it. When it entered a house, its appearance was unknown. And these appeared within the lamentation tablets as well of Sumer. Around 200 years later, during the reign of King Hammurabi, literally the father of the rabbi, or the rabbis of Babylon, ancient texts tell of a powerful weapon that the kings used in battle. So these are the Amorites, right, the Babylonians. Quote, with the powerful weapon with which Marduk, again Bel Marduk, becoming Baal, later that was related to Set, and then it became Aten and Adon and so on and so forth, proclaimed his triumphs, the hero, Hammurabi, overthrew in battle the armies of Ishnuna, Subartu, and Gutium. With the great power of Marduk, he overthrew the armies of Sutium, Turuku, Kamu. With the mighty power which Anu and Enlil had given him, he defeated all his enemies as far as the country of Subartu, unquote. I mean, this also appears as well within legends throughout the Americas. The Mayan Popol Vuh, for example, describes the destructive effects of fire from the sky that put out eyes and decomposed flesh and entrails, which was apparently of human origin. The Popol Vuh also describes how great cities to the north, apparently in what is today the United States, were destroyed at this same time. This corresponds with an ancient legend from a dying totemic cult in northern Canada, near the tundra, where it tells of a time before the cold descended from the north, before the Ice Age. It states further that, in the days when great forests and flowering meadows were here, demons came and made slaves of our people. Demons came and made slaves of our people, and sent the young to die among the rocks and below the ground. Literally to mine them, right? Remember, Saturn is a deity associated with mining, the chthonic realms. And the mercantilist class are associated with that as well. But then arrived the Thunderbird, and our people were freed. We learned about the marvellous cities of the Thunderbird, which were beyond the big lakes and rivers to the south in the US. Many of our people left us and saw these shining cities, and witnessed the grand homes and the mystery of men who flew upon the skies. But then the demons returned, and there was terrible destruction. Those of our people who had gone southward returned to declare that all life in the cities was gone. Nothing but silence remained, unquote. In his Theogony, Hesiod wrote, the boundless sea rang terribly around, and the earth crashed loudly. Wide heaven was shaken and groaned, and high Olympus reeled from its foundations. Under the charge of the undying gods, from the deep sound of the gods' feet, and the fearful onset of their hard missiles, the heavy quaking reached even far Tartarus. From the skies opposite Mount Olympus, he, Zeus, came forthwith, hurling his lightning. The bolts flew thick and fast from his strong hand. Thunder and lightning together, whirling as an awesome flame, the fertile earth crashed around and burning, and the vast wood crackled aloud with fire all about. All the land seethed, as did the sweet water streams and the salty sea. The hot vapour lapped around the Titans, of Gaia born. Flame unspeakable rose bright the upper air. The flash and glare of the thunderstone, its lightning, blinded their eyes, so strong it was. Astounding heat seized chaos. It seemed as if earth and wide heaven above had come together. A mighty crash as though earth was hurled to ruin. Also the winds brought rumbling, earthquake and dust storm, thunder and lightning. Zeus thundered hard and mightily, and the earth around resounded terribly, as did the wide heaven above and the sea and the watery streams, even the nether parts of the earth. Through the two of them, Zeus and Typhoeus, through the thunder and lightning, heat engulfed dark blue sea, and through the fire and the scorching winds and blazing thunderbolts, the whole earth seethed, and the sky and sea. Great waves raged along the beaches, and there arose an endless shaking. A great part of huge earth was scorched by the terrible vapour, melting as tin melts when heated by man's art. In the glow of a blazing fire did the earth melt down. It is also mentioned, and this really concerns the Tower of Babel myth, which by the way also appears in the Popol Vuh of the Mayans. So, quoting from researcher Erich von Fange, in regards to this ziggurat, René Nürbergen wrote in his classic work Secrets of the Lost Races, quote, it appeared that fire had struck the tower and split it down to the very foundation. In different parts of the ruins, immense brown and black masses of brickwork had been changed to a vitrified state, subject to some kind of fierce heat, and completely molten. The whole ruin has the appearance of a burnt mountain, unquote. Similar ruins have been found in the Americas, as we see from this next Nürbergen quote. Quote, the continents of the New World also possess several examples of prehistoric cultures destroyed by a great conflagration. Not far from Cuzco, Peru, near the pre-Inca forests of Sacsayhuaman, an area of 18,000 square yards of mountain rock has been fused and crystallized. Not only the mountainside, but a number of the dressed granite blocks of nearby fortresses show signs of similar vitrification through extremely high radiated heat. And he goes on to mention other sites, all the way down to Brazil and the western United States and such. So, as you can see, there was something very, very peculiar. I mean, I've got tons of these quotes, by the way. There was something very bloody peculiar going on in the ancient times that, perhaps forced this Asura mercantile class or caste who worshipped this horned deity to leave and to seek pastures anew in Western Asia. Was it down to some mass conflagration by technology that's now unknown to us? There's also other such things to mention on that, but I'll leave it there because it's quite late here now, so I'm going to leave it there and think of this as an introductory set of episodes to the golden age of Saturn's America, but it's very much important, extremely important actually, I would say. So with that, I thank you and see you later. Bye-bye.